Hey everybody, it's the Mad Master here. I'm doing a video today, and this video is going to be about Star Wars. Like, as if we don't have like the millionth video about that. But I liked this take that Russell Dobular of Do Dissidents did at one point. Um, he pretty much has it right. It's one of my favorite political channels right now. Oh, what's this crap? So I'm going to be playing it and just commenting on it each step of the way here. So I'm just going to talk about my own opinion about Star Wars and so forth. So get started here.
On May 25, 1977, 20th Century Fox released Star Wars. Although no one knew it at the time, it would cause a chain reaction that changed movie-going, sci-fi, and pop culture forever. In 1975, Jaws had established the summer blockbuster model that's defined Hollywood release schedules ever since, but it was the success of Star Wars that really cemented it. The idea that summer is for action, spectacle, and high-concept films, with fall and winter reserved for the Oscar bait, was born in the light of the exploding Death Star and the then unheard-of box office grosses that it left in its wake, tripling the haul of other hits that year like Smokey and the Bandit and Saturday Night Fever. The impact of Star Wars on science
I've
fiction
never seen
is a
Smokey
mixed
and the
bag.
Bandit.
Although there had been big-budget
Even though it has one of my
studio-backed
favorite
ventures
cars.
in the genre before,
I want to get.
Kubrick's 2001: A Space Odyssey had opened 9 years earlier to much fanfare and success,
The best
along
movies
with
ever
Planet
made.
of the Apes, which spawned 4 sequels and multiple
I love
reboots.
Planet of the Apes and their
Sci-fi had
sequels.
traditionally been relegated to the category of B-picture.
Feel the frightening fury of a man-beast, aroused to strange emotions by its first sight of a woman.
Low budget, often campy, and very niche. It was much beloved by its fans, a sentiment captured beautifully in the song Science Fiction Double Feature, Richard O'Brien's elegiac homage to the B-movies of his youth.
Great movie. I just saw it actually about a year ago.
But sci-fi
Again,
was
in the
largely
theater.
ignored by mainstream media and award shows. Star Wars changed all that. Well, maybe not the award show part, although it was nominated for Best Picture, a very rare thing for a movie with laser guns and spaceships at that time. And even though it lost to Annie Hall, it's a testament to the cultural phenomena it represented that the Academy, which was still powerful, respected, and
People were
quite
really skinny
stodgy
in the
at
70s,
time,
weren't they?
felt compelled to give Star Wars the consolation prize of a special award, while virtually
All the
ignoring
cocaine.
Close Encounters of the Third Kind,
Cigarettes.
also a hit film that year, and one that was probably more in their wheelhouse. So where's the downside to sci-fi going mainstream? Well, when nobody cares what you're doing, and they aren't giving you much money to do it anyway, that opens up a lot of room for experimentation. From Ed Wood making Bela Lugosi wrestle a rubber octopus in a kiddie pool, to the brilliant low-budget cautionary tale The Day the Earth Stood Still, to a personal favorite,
Latest dog.
and maybe the most purely punk rock film ever made, A Boy and His Dog.
That stupid broad.
You're so funny when you're sexually frustrated.
Damn it.
Sci-fi was a place where the
There he
studio
is.
bosses
It's Russell
didn't really
Dobular.
dare to tread. Bring it in on a low enough budget for it to make a profit off the genre's built-in fan base, and you could pretty much do what you wanted. Not so after Star Wars. Sci-fi and fantasy films became a big money proposition, and as a result, the likelihood of something as weird and off the wall as George Lucas's own dystopian 1971
It's another great film.
THX 1138 getting major financing and a wide release became slim to nil.
The beginning of the Downward Spiral has samples from that film, by the way.
Sure,
9 Inch Nails, by the way.
Blade Runner and Denis Villeneuve's recent Dune films could never have been executed on the same scale without massive infusions of studio cash. But if you look at the 3 adaptations of Richard Matheson's short story I Am Legend, you can see very clearly what got lost in the translation from beloved B genre to well-financed studio darling. The Last Man on Earth, starring Vincent Price, is creepy and claustrophobic, with its vision of a lone man fighting off hordes of vampires from inside a boarded-up house, inspiring George Romero's radical new take on zombies as viral outbreak in Night of the Living Dead. The second, Omega Man, starring Charlton Heston, is campier and sillier, but still a cult classic and loads of fun.
Very
Compare
true.
these to the soulless corporate product that is.
Another thing we should say about the 70s is that it had a lot of cool cult classic ones, especially with Charlton Heston. He was really prolific in the science fiction genre. You know, Soylent Green being another movie, too.
I Am Legend starring Will Smith. It's neither disturbing and nightmarish like the
Pretty
first,
mid.
or campy and fun like the
But it
second.
had some thrills, too.
It's the kind of film that's keeping Hollywood up nights, and for good reason. Because while we may be a long way, if ever, from AI making The Godfather, we're probably only a few years away from any 12-year-old being able to make something as unoriginal and uninspired as I Am Legend just by entering
Pretty
a
true.
prompt into ChatGPT. It calls to mind the scene in Barton Fink where the producer asks the transplanted Broadway playwright what he did to make the unpredictable, despotic, deranged studio boss Lipnick take an interest in him.
Never make Lipnick like you. Never!
I don't understand.
Deaf? He likes you. He's taken an interest. What the hell did you say to him?
Similarly, in many ways, sci-fi was better off before the studios took an interest. Finally, on the cultural front, there had never been anything like Star Wars, and you could make the argument that there was never a film series with the same kind of wall-to-wall societal penetration again. Yes, I know, I can hear it now.
As if millions of voices suddenly cried out in terror.
Lord of the Rings, Harry Potter, Marvel! All very worthy film series that have entertained millions, but none of them begins to approach the impact of the original Star Wars trilogy. The phenomenon was less like a film and more like the kind of all-pervasive omnipresence that a very few rare pop stars like Elvis, the Beatles, or Michael Jackson have achieved. Yes, Taylor Swift is about as visible as you can be in a media landscape with infinite options, but that's a big qualifier. I promise you, most of the people living today on planet Earth couldn't name a Taylor Swift song. But in 1984, you would have had to go looking for an uncontacted tribe in the Amazon to find someone who wouldn't recognize the chorus of Billie Jean. No one will ever experience that level of fame again. It just isn't possible anymore. So whether Lord of the Rings or Harry Potter or Marvel or...
That's actually a really interesting assessment.
...better or worse or just as good qualitatively is beside the point. They all sprang up in a post-internet world where the audience isn't nearly as captive. From my own personal experience, I can only compare what Star Wars was in the 70s and 80s to MJ in his Thriller era, and I can't compare either to anything that came after. Still skeptical? Still thinking Harry Potter holds an equivalent place in our own time? Let me show you that you're wrong. Star Wars was so big and so impactful that some people will still consume anything labeled Star Wars, even though there hasn't been a good film to come out of the franchise since 1983.
I'm going to pause it there a second. I'm going to say, like, I was a huge fan of Star Wars growing up. I have my original that I kind of got from this dude as a kid, this older guy. I still have my Darth Vader carrying case that he gave me, and I still have a bunch of Star Wars stuff. I have way more Transformers now. But I do have a lot of Star Wars stuff, and I really was a big fan of Return of the Jedi, especially. There's kind of a famous picture of me in a hat at Showbiz Pizza with a Return of the Jedi. I'm old, you know. Anyways, not that that matters in this video. But the whole notion, you know, the Star Wars thing, like, as far as my own thing, he will get into where my cutting off point is sort of like, there are exceptions like Mandalorian or Andor. I started watching that a little bit, and maybe early Mandalorian, and then some other of the EU, not European Union, but the, you know, extended universe. Now they call it Legends or whatever. Anyways, there are exceptions to the rule for this rule, but I think I've said it before, like 1995 was kind of the cutoff point when they started doing these like special editions, and he'll get into that in a minute here. So
and nothing great since 1980. Star Wars movies have ranged from
Return of the Jedi is
mediocre
great.
to unwatchable for 41 years. And with the exception of Andor and The Mandalorian Season 1, kind of 2, you could say the same about the TV series. And yet, a lot of people are very upset about the latest attempt of poor little rich kid screenwriters to hide their lack of talent and meaningful life experience behind a cavalcade of brownness and queerness, otherwise known as The Acolyte.
The power of one, the power of two, the power of many.
That, my friends,
Scanners.
is how big Star Wars was in its day. It was so big that some of you still care about Star Wars, like a crackhead that hasn't been able to get a real hit in almost half a century, but keeps going back to the same corner and hoping it won't just be baking soda this time.
Oh my god, that's hilarious. So, I follow a lot of the rhetoric about Star Wars just because I find it entertaining, but I haven't watched any. Other than like Andor and maybe a couple episodes of some of Andor and some of Mandalorian. I haven't really watched anything. I saw all 3 of the new trilogy. Yeah, it's not great, but I did. I guess I'm coming. I'm coming from it's like an Iron Maiden album. It's like Iron Maiden's better quality than Star Wars nowadays. By the way, even if they're getting old and stuff. But even they're better than Star Wars. But like the new albums and stuff. I mean, their albums are better than on a quality level than new Star Wars. So I'm a lifelong fan of Star Wars and stuff, so of course I'm going to watch, some of the new movies and that's kind of how I kind of keep my distance from it. I say, this is not really my thing, it's anymore, whatever, but anyways.
In that sense, the Collider's obnoxious formulation that the problem with Star Wars is its fans isn't as off base as it might appear at first blush. No one furiously attacked the crimes of Grindelwald because the fans of Harry Potter just didn't care that much. Not so with Star Wars. They care deeply about it still. So in that sense, yes, the fans are the problem, in that inexplicably the franchise still has any. But Collider and company should watch out what they wish for, because when the hate watchers go, you won't be able to fill a screening room with what remains of the audience. Now, I know a lot of folks won't want to hear this, especially people who make their living dropping a video every time Kathleen Kennedy farts in someone's general direction. But no, Disney did not kill Star Wars.
Analyzing evil.
It's just driving the final nails into a coffin that George Lucas built with the prequels a quarter century ago. As an exer who had to wait 3 years to find out that Darth Vader was Luke's father,
I am your father.
And another 3 years for confirmation,
Call me Papa,
which in child
baby.
years adds up to around 150 total years.
What the fuck?
It's funny hearing pop culture channels tear down the Acolyte for violating lore established in the prequels, which themselves destroyed the lore and much of the magic of the Star Wars universe. The Phantom Menace was probably the most anticipated film release in history. It had been 16 years since the movie-going public had gotten a hit off that Galaxy Far, Far Away stem, and they were stoked. Some people camped outside for weeks waiting for tickets to go on sale.
So before I go into this one, this is kind of a common refrain from Generation X and people of similar age, I guess you'd say. And I count myself among them that they say there is a cutoff point for everybody. There's a cutoff point with Metallica, Like, for example, I hate to compare this to music, but oh yeah, well, I heard the Black Album and it just sounded, there was something missing. Well, then people a couple of years younger would be like, oh, I love the Black Album, but I hate Load, I never hated the Black Album, I just thought it was kind of a step down, it's disappointing. So anyways, I'll keep going.
In New York City, the well-appointed Ziegfeld was scheduled to host the very first area showing at midnight on May 19, 1999. In those days, I was busy running 3 theaters in the East Village, and anyway, I was never the kind of freak that was going to pitch a tent on the street for a movie.
Cool guy.
But a friend hooked me up, so I was one of the lucky few to score a seat. You've never seen an audience so psyched for a movie as the very first audience for the very first showing of the very first new Star Wars film in 16 years. Almost all 20 and 30-somethings who'd grown up on the franchise, we were like Jesus freaks waiting for a new sanctioned by God chapter of the Bible to drop.
I'm just going to put a little caveat on that. See, I did go see it like maybe a couple weeks later after it premiered. I wasn't like as rabid about it because at that point in time in my life, I was like all about German power metal pretty much. So it was like my life in Manowar, and Merciful Fate, or whatever, So, and a little bit of black metal and some other stuff. But like I was more into music like at that point. I was watching movies with my friends every weekend. We'd watch a lot of movies, but I wasn't like as stoked about new Star Wars. So I mean, I saw all 3 of those in the theaters too, but I count myself partly into that thing because I worked at Walgreens. They gave me this huge Phantom Menace like display that I used to have in my apartment. I just remembered that. Wow, I used to have like this huge cardboard display in my apartment from Walgreens that they gave me. Oh my God. Well, that's taking me back a ways, but yeah. I was into it, but I was like, I mean, I was still into Star Wars, but it was like kind of a memory that was kind of, I don't know if it wasn't fading, but I wasn't as like gung-ho about it. And I heard that it was kind of not as great as they said it. And I would actually pinpoint the special editions as my beginning of my like reluctance, which was like a year or 2 before, I believe, in liking newer Star Wars, because I was like, why are they putting these scenes in here that don't even fit or just look stupid? So anyways.
Only in this case, God was George Lucas. How little did we know of the horrors that awaited us over the course of the film's 2-hour and 11-minute runtime. There had been rumors, vague mumblings from reported screenings out west that the movie was terrible. But in these early days of the internet, those were unconfirmed, and we were happy to ignore them. Some wags had the poor taste to mention Willow, Lucas's awful attempt to catch Star Wars lightning in a bottle
I'm gonna defy him on that. Willow's not that bad.
Twice by following Joseph Campbell's story beats and archetypes, once again in a far less interesting and original vehicle, but nobody wanted to hear that. Nobody wanted to imagine that a Star Wars movie could possibly be as bad, or even worse, than Willow. Then the lights faded, and we quickly assumed the role of the Sabine women, subjected to the crudest assault by our conquerors imaginable there in the dark.
Kind of wild to think it was so long ago now.
Right from the beginning, you knew something wasn't right. Here are these weird alien things talking about space trade, and are they Asian or something? What is going on here?
The blockade is finished. We dare not go against the Jedi.
It was nothing like the thrilling opening scenes of the old films. Then,
Ian McDiarmid is pretty good though. I like him as the Emperor. If I see him on that, that's why I watched the last one, the most recent one of the main story, because I like Ian McDiarmid. I love the Emperor. I love the Emperor. Anyways, I want to get that Emperor shirt that has the Emperor band logo and the Emperor Palpatine. I don't think there's a shirt. I'll make it. I don't care. It's bootleg. I'll just make one of them for myself.
Out came the lightsabers. And even though we hadn't been given any reason to care thus far, there were Jedi on screen with lightsabers. We cheered. We hoped against hope that maybe this movie wouldn't suck, even as the evidence was mounting that it was going to suck. Oh yes, it was going to suck big, hairy bantha balls. Then,
that's an awesome line.
2 things happened that broke Star Wars forever. The first was the introduction of the idea of midichlorians.
Now this is the key moment for me, and I'll give a little bit of commentary on that in a bit, probably.
The reading is off the chart. Over 20,000.
Even Master Yoda doesn't have a midichlorian count that high.
And the second was the virgin birth of Anakin Skywalker.
So I'm going to pause this for a second. I think that Lucas is kind of conflicted because he has this like mystical bent. You know, early on that's what it was all about with Star Wars, and then he's like kind of a atheistic, agnostic kind of person. So he wanted to like kind of fuse the two in. This is just my assumption, and it's just like, see, one of the things about the Last Jedi was that they did at the end of the movie they kind of returned a little bit of that mysticism to like, oh, everybody has the Force to some extent. You know, I have these kids, they didn't really it seemed like, you know, when I was a kid, when you watched Star Wars after Empire Strikes Back, you would try to like levitate stuff, like maybe I can levitate that. Like it was kind of a thing for a lot of kids to try to do that, like to just try to close your eyes and try to levitate stuff. But anyways, that was kind of the thing, which was ruined by this midichlorian crap. I still think it's crap. I don't think they should explain it. If they do talk about the Force, like maybe some people are better with it or whatever, but still.
Who was his father?
There was no father. I carried him. I gave birth.
I think that laugh was added.
I can't explain what happened.
Attacking the Acolyte for violating Star Wars lore with an immaculate lesbian birth that predates the immaculate asexual birth of Anakin Skywalker is really a case of people who have had their standards systematically lowered, accusing others of the same.
Correct.
I carried them. I created them.
If you only knew the power of one, the power of two, the power of many.
If you're
Great AI.
accepting the very premise of midichlorians
awesome.
and immaculate births in Star Wars, but you won't accept lesbian space witches, you've simply had your standards lowered at an earlier point.
Correct.
On an ever-descending trajectory of suck.
I don't want to like compare this to music, but it's like, it's kind of like okay, I'm going to say it. I'm going to just come out and say it. It's like new Metallica. Like, wow, like it went back to metal, dude. You know, yeah, but it's not great, you know, like it was. I think Hardwired was actually pretty good, but it's like when, you know, Death Magnetic or whatever came out, I was like, oh my god, you know, it's like this calculated return. So, like, or, you know, maybe that's not a good comparison. I think a good comparison is Iron Maiden. You know, I love all their albums, but a lot of times people talk about the 90s albums as if they were a step down. And now, like, people might look back and say, oh, those were better than now or something. You know, it's kind of the same thing. I don't agree with that. I have a lot of differing opinions about Iron Maiden, but, you know, you can almost put that into perspective of musical. People make excuses and rationalizations for different things, you know. That's kind of what I'm trying to say.
As soon as Obi-Wan started talking about midichlorian counts, Star Wars as a beautiful myth and morality tale died.
Amen.
And whatever this misshapen pile of Tusken Raider
so
crap carrying the logo now may be, was born.
100%. 100%, and it was born from the special editions, I would have to say. Shadows of the Empire is a real, like, last, I would consider, genuine Star Wars product to come out. Like, genuine as in, you know, like, the quality was... I actually haven't consumed everything about Shadows of the Empire, but, like, I just the premise and stuff, reading about it, and playing the video games and stuff, and, you know, reading it, I don't think that was coming from the place that some of this other stuff was coming from later, so...
Caring what happened after that
commercial
is
too.
like yelling at a
commercial
corpse
still,
that's been rotting in the ground since the turn of the millennium. Because when the Force became no longer a primer on Eastern mysticism for kids...
Exactly.
Going from one side of this galaxy to the other, I've seen a lot of strange stuff, but I've never seen anything to make me believe there's one all-powerful force.
And the experience of it no
Amen.
longer framed as a matter of expanded consciousness, but one of having the right blood, well, now you went and made the Force elitist.
Completely correct. And that's why, like, I hated it after that. And it was kind of like this gnawing feeling that you get when you watch the movies and you're like, this doesn't make sense, and the acting is really stilted. I love Natalie Portman, but she's a lot. But you know, it's like, other than that, it's hard to watch. You know, maybe a little Yoda, and little Samuel Jackson is not bad. You know, and Ian McDermott, like I mentioned. But yeah, it's pretty crappy because of that factor being taken away.
Sure, there was always that fairy tale aristocratic blood will out logic in Luke's story of someone from a renowned family raised as a peasant, nonetheless finding his specialness, and in the very idea of the Force running in the Skywalker family. But until the words midichlorian were spoken, you could kind of accept the proposition of a bloodline being exceptionally Force sensitive without thinking that anyone without special microbes would be blind to what Yoda quite clearly presents not as a rare and extraordinary skill set, but as the very nature of existence.
Yes.
Its energy surrounds us and binds us. Luminous beings, Zoe, not this crude matter.
Midichlorians took an idea that had been very hopeful and inspiring and turned it into something that only a few special people can experience. Essentially, in the Star Wars universe forever after, communion with God is only for the midichlorianally gifted, with everyone else congenitally unable to live in a higher state of being. And I can tell you, as a boy who was inspired to do all kinds of dangerous climbing and flipping and balancing in high places because I wanted to be like Luke, that just really sucks. And I feel bad for all the boys and girls today who have grown up in a world where you can't be a Jedi if you aren't born that way. And Kathleen Kennedy did not do that. George Lucas did.
I went over to George Lucas and said, George, what the F am I saying?
What's a midichlorian?
What's a midichlorian? And I remember George said, okay, you know in your gut, you have millions of bacteria. I says, yeah. Okay, one of those has an intelligence. And then he laughed.
Son of a bitch!
But back to that horrible night. For any of us who still held out hope that it might get better, the final insult was still to come. Jar Jar Binks walked on screen.
Please call Jar Jar Binks. This is your humble servant.
That won't be necessary.
Oh, but it is.
Guy got
and at
death
that
threats
moment,
for that. It's pretty
the
terrible.
realization dawned on us that there would be no rescue, that it would not get better, that this was it. This was the movie. After 16 years, this was what Lucas had come up with. Willow? God. At that point, we would have settled for the holiday special.
It's not that bad.
When it finally ended, there was no clapping. None. Zero.
Star Wars.
Only sadness and silence. We avoided eye contact as we exited feeling dirty and violated, eager to get home and hug our children, significant others, pets.
Did a little organization.
Anything to take away the awful realization, if even for a moment, that Star Wars was truly dead. So, why am I telling you all this? Well, remember the medium in Poltergeist? This is where I try to persuade you to go into the light and stop haunting the house. Because you don't belong here anymore.
Yes, yes.
Well, Anakin just killed a whole Death Star. How many people died on that?
All right, Zippet.
Yes. It's terrible
Anakin killed the
that
Death
in
Star.
our modern
Did you know that?
world, a soulless corporation can buy the rights to a cherished cultural myth and destroy it.
Exactly.
It would be as if somebody bought the Odyssey off Homer right at the part where Odysseus is passing between the Scylla and Charybdis, and then they spent the rest of the story degrading his character before having his wife run off with a transgender Cyclops at the end. It sucks, but it's time to move on.
Yeah.
It doesn't belong to you anymore. It doesn't belong to us. It doesn't even belong to the younger, hipper fan base they're after because they aren't watching it either. This is for BlackRock and Vanguard, and for half-bright dipshits with enough family money to write screenplays for peanuts that all their critical theory indoctrinated friends will like.
Damn. I didn't remember this part.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Huh.
Ask Filoni. Okay.
Ask Filoni.
I cut that.
Yeah, it's
I talked over that part, but
hey, if you really, really want to experience what a continuation of the Star Wars saga might have been like, if Lucas hadn't forgotten what was special about his own creation and then sold it to the white slavers at Disney, who beat to death the stinking corpse of what was left, I'd recommend the Expanded Universe books.
Exactly.
They perfectly capture the tone of the original trilogy while expanding into more mature themes that will appeal to the adult reader. It's no
I own all
accident
three of those
that one
books.
of
I
the
don't
first
own those
things
books,
Kennedy
though, the
did
second
after
ones.
Disney acquired Lucasfilm was to kill it off. The last thing she wanted was a reminder of what might have been out there for fans to compare to the social engineering project that she had in mind. Beyond that, there's only one thing to do about Star Wars that makes sense for anyone who loves it or ever found joy and inspiration in it. In the words of that great philosopher king of the desert wastelands, the Lord Humongous, just walk away.
Just walk away, and there will be an end to the horror.
Thanks for watching.
So it's pretty good. I agree, actually, for the most part, that George Lucas is kind of, well, he was villain. It was a People versus George Lucas was a movie that came out in the 2000s. So it's kind of weird that people have such amnesia about stuff, but I guess it's the generations too. Like some younger people, maybe millennials, and maybe some Gen Z like those prequels and stuff. But I don't like them all that much. There's there's salvageable. It's salvageable. Like Revenge of the Sith. Like there's parts that are salvageable about that more than the other ones. That's the only one I actually own. So, but yeah, I really enjoy that commentary. I think that's pretty much the gist of how I feel, and a lot of people feel. And he actually went into what I've been talking about for years with the midichlorians and all that stuff. I think that was like the death knell of what I grew up, as far as why I liked Star Wars, like the essence of what it was all about to me, growing up. And I had or spiritual people around when in my household sometimes and stuff, and talked about Joseph Campbell and all that stuff. So yeah, it's pretty ridiculous how it became. But yeah, I wanted to go over that video. You should check out that channel in general. So I did watch the whole video. I thought it was a little bit longer, so I was a little bit worried, but it's cool that it's only 21 minutes and 46 seconds. Anyways, that's about all.